If skyscrapers can just collapse like that, we should close them all down, shouldn't we?
Certainly, if 9/11 is anything to go by, it's massively changed the US foreign policy. It's given them what they feel anyway is a carte blanche, not only to deploy over in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, the Middle East, all over Africa, etc., but in Europe too. Anyway, so I just thought we'd take a look, because quite a few people have asked me over the last few months about why am I not appearing on Russia Today anymore. So I thought I'd kind of scratch my head and ask myself the same question. And I'll play you now one of the penultimate clips of me being on Russia Today channel, where I was asked to comment on a British report into the death of Alexander Litvinenko, the Russian spy who was poisoned with polonium here in London. And this is what I had to say.
The absolute nub of this issue is the research that Litvinenko had been doing into the Moscow Ryazan bombings of 1999, which helped spark the Chechen War, a terrorist attack that happened in Russia in 1999. The book he wrote, Blowing Up Russia, most of your listeners won't have time to have read it, but I did, and you'll find in there that there is evidence that actually points to Putin being behind those attacks, but also to Boris Berezovsky, who was removed as a criminal from Russia by Putin, and he found his home in London. Now, when Berezovsky was in London, he was being funded by two people we know about. One was the Duke of Kent, and probably the security services too. So what Litvinenko was saying effectively was that possibly Berezovsky was the main instigator of these attacks in Russia, not Putin. So I would advise people that want to look deeper into this to look at this book, Blowing Up Russia, but also to bear in mind that Berezovsky may have been the main instigator of those terrorist attacks. Certainly his death, Berezovsky, in 2013 here in London, was very suspicious. It may have put Berezovsky out of the way because he had some very important evidence that he could possibly have given that would have made this inquest and this public inquiry much more interesting, where many secrets would have come out.
So that's me speaking earlier this year on RT, Russia Today channel. Martin, these attacks, the Moscow bombings, there were basically massive blocks of flats which were blown to pieces in 1999. There were several of these attacks, but they were a kind of 9/11 for Russia. Many people haven't heard of them.
Yeah, I would refer to them as 999 because they all happened in September 99. So if you wanted to have a moniker for them, that's what you would say is 999. You've got to remember what the political situation was in Russia at that stage, which was that prior to the Zyuganov and the Communist Party were set fair to win the 1998 elections in Russia, and Putin came forward as a result of machinations by Berezovsky and others. And at that stage...
Well, Putin was from the FSB, the security
Yeah,
service.
but I mean, in other words, the oligarchy got very panicked that the Communist Party was going to win the election in Russia. Now, in actual fact, that wouldn't have been abnormal in the rest of Europe, Eastern Europe, including in Poland, for example. The former communists had won the second election. Once people had a good taste of Thatcherism over there, and I used to work over there, they got pretty disillusioned pretty damn quickly, and therefore they started to think in terms of going back to some aspects of the old system. Now, there was a big lobby of oligarchs in Russia and Western advisors and Western intelligence services who were absolutely horrified by that idea. How can we explain to the ordinary folk of Britain that the Russians have just re-elected the Communist Party? So we'll have to do something to stop this. So they all did. They all got together and stopped it. At that stage, Putin was seen as a cat's paw for Western intelligence services, because what Zyuganov said in the election campaign was, this is now a straight fight between the KGB and the Communist Party. And I call upon people to vote for the Communist Party.
Putin took over as president in 2000, and then he kind of turned the tables on Berezovsky, didn't he? Pretty much straight away.
Yeah, I think what happened was Putin represents what's called the Siloviki, which are the kind, the old intelligence structure of the country, and they were happy enough to go along with whatever was required to prevent the communists taking power. But then they also had their own views about what the oligarchy should and shouldn't be doing, and they basically said to the oligarchy, Berezovsky being the leader of the oligarchy, we are now in charge. You've messed things up. It's time for us to run the show.
As one of the top people at the FSB, when Putin was there, and also as acting prime minister, to allow Berezovsky to get away with these attacks, Berezovsky may have thought, well, hey, this guy, I can trust him, he can be my puppet.
That's what he thought, but Putin was smarter than he was. Now, Berezovsky, I think, was murdered by MI6, because what Berezovsky was saying quite frequently was that why don't we use this stuff against Putin? We know he was involved in these kind of attacks, because I was involved with them too. But of course, Berezovsky's got a big mouth, basically, and eventually he's becoming an embarrassment. Because Putin's obvious response to that is, we know everything that happened on 9/11. Do you want us to start talking about that?
Yes, he certainly was being paid he was working for MI6, Litvinenko. That BBC dug that
I think he murdered Litvinenko as well, because he's trying to set Putin up.
One thing I would say, though, is Berezovsky, I said on there that the Duke of Kent was paying Berezovsky. It was the other way round. Duke of Kent, of course, is a major figure in Anglo-Russian relations. He speaks fluent Russian. He's the top Freemason in Britain, the Duke of Kent, as well.
Yeah, and I think, don't forget that when the police investigated the Litvinenko case and they found polonium, and you've asked yourself the question, why would anybody use polonium, which is so traceable, to murder somebody? But they found traces of polonium in Berezovsky's office. In other words, I think Berezovsky murdered Litvinenko in order to create an incident with Putin, because he was running out of options, Berezovsky. He wanted to replace Putin, and he was that ambitious.
And he was running out of money.
Yeah.
Having been a very rich person over in
Russia.
But
I mean, because he was becoming a loose cannon.
There is a point
because he was going on and on and on about 999.
A point here, Martin, and that is that it's a pity that you can't. It's very difficult to criticise Putin or even talk about, for example, the Russian Communist Party on RT. All of these major mainstream media nowadays, they really do seem to be quite propagandistic. They're just pushing their point of view.
Well, I think that...
But don't you think that maybe in any kind of coming war, if there is an international news service out there that will criticise their own people as well, that they could well win that war, because so much of it is an information war?
It is, and what happens is, by playing one off against another, we can gradually get the truth out there. I think Berezovsky was largely responsible for 999. I think Putin may have had a hand in it, but he wasn't the main player. And I think that what you've got to remember, that when the bombs went off in Moscow in 1999, the people behind it were very similar to the oligarchs who planted bombs in Bologna railway station in 1980. It was virtually exactly the same NATO game plan. We've got to stop the communists winning elections, so we've got to kill some ordinary people. Same in Russia, same in Italy.
Getting bigger by being better. The number one choice for Bristol. This is BCFM 93.2.
Anyway, we're going to talk Space Wars now, and our first clip is from this documentary just out from CNN, a very dramatic film, and it's called War in Space, the Next Battlefield. What they do there, Martin, is they give us an idea of what a sort of cyber-space attack will be, coming from space, and also kind of crippling US satellites, that kind of thing.
As the sun sets and the nation goes to sleep, the battle for supremacy in space is about to begin. One final night before Americans wake up to a new and daunting reality. 10 a.m. New York, 7 a.m. Los Angeles. Cities normally buzzing with the morning rush suddenly stall. TV networks start to go dark. Internet connections run slow. ATMs begin to malfunction.